Hey everyone, welcome to the Organizing Variables. As always, I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly, but I'll let you pause and read details as you desire, but I'll scoot right along. This is an ongoing sequence of our investigation of formalism. And okay, Bob, we get it. You don't want us to bore you. And so the point is, always the point in art and composition is that you get to this point, which is to create a sense of radiance and awe or meaning. That's the main thing. And we all know what that means. We know that we resonate with it, and it's why we tell anybody that we think it's cool. There's a mystery, there's something. And if you get to this point where you create a sense of awe in your viewers, put a fork in it, you got it. But there's all this bottom part is how we get up to that. This is all that matters, but what we're discussing here is how to get there. Right? Okay, so there's the basics of what's your subject matter, medium, and motivation. We've talked about that. We've also talked about the 7 art elements, the basic foundation, building blocks, so to speak, of line, value, color, shape, form, texture, space, and you did some investigations of those. Now, today, we're going to focus on the organizing variables, which are balance and movement, emphasis, repetition, and transition, right? All to create a composition. All of this up here leads to some kind of composition. Kind of poignant, right? You're composing something or thinking about composing something at the moment, which is a single evocative orchestration of the art elements and the organizing variables. Also within some kind of sense of context and scale to create artistic lushiness, right? Yumminess, that's this thing. It's the reason why you tell a friend. And here it is. But we'll get coming attractions will be here and here. All right. But for now, and particularly at this moment, as you prepare to assemble the compositions of your vases, let's consider the organizing variables, which are balance, movement, emphasis, repetition, and transition. So let's go through them. Balance, and there's a bazillion synonyms here and kind of definitions, but in general, there's a symmetry, an even or sort of symmetric sense. You know, Calder's piece is kind of symmetrical. Or there's a precarious asymmetry, like Richard Shaw's. Or there's a sense of tumbling, or the organic, right? And here's a group project, Camping, in which it was initiated by Mr. Carroll, and this is one of his many pieces. Right? And then a lot of artists try to recreate that. There's also, a sense in balance of the stately and solid, or the aggro sway, right? So a sense of balance and movement, right? An act of physical change or position, right? Going from here to there, activity, motion, progression. Literally going from here to there, like you see here in this composition. Or also in an abstract sense, as here with Marcel Duchamp, or digitally created a translation into physical form, as you see in these examples. Or there's also the more slow and subtle examples of movement, like the slow jam poster child of weight and pressure you see here, right? Can you see that? Forcing down. Or the freeze frame of melting. Or gestural, multi-directional expressive motion, like you see here in 2D by Franz Klein, and here by John Hopkins in 3D. Or in this installation, right? Zigzagging and spiraling all over the room. But for our purposes, really, you think? A sense of motion. So emphasis. Emphasis, and the most important synonym for that, of course, is focal point, but also priority, accent, attention, etc. You can read these yourself. And here, of course, there's a focal point is this beautiful, vertical line that's created by that sense of motion. Here, the tree, right? It's where one's eye is drawn, or where is the center of attention. I mean, all of this is beautiful and crazy amazing, but this is the center of attention. As here with Remedios Varo, right, in the central figure. Or M.C. Escher's piece in the reflection. Or again, this, which illustrates both focal point and a sense of motion. Everything is on a continuum in line, value, color, shape, form, texture, space, conspire to create balance, movement, emphasis, repetition, transition. And most compositions have all of them. This one here has all of them. You can go through and see all, name them all, but there's also a sense of emphasis or focal point, which is created by this dramatic composition. Also here, for completely different reasons, this goes much more, instead of an X shape, this has much more of a voluptuous rounded shapes which echo the form. Okay, and repetition. Repetition is the action of repeating something, the occurrence of an action, object, form, scene, etc. It's some kind of pattern, some kind of recurrence, and that happens in most compositions, right? It creates a sense of stability. In architectural form, for example, you see here, in surreal fantasy, as you see here with Magritte, in tile mosaics, right? Or groovy performances. All of these are senses of repetition. Or interconnected design, as you see with M.C. Escher, right? Woo! But also in ritual monuments, as you see here from the terracotta warriors from ancient China. Or this contemporary installation, also having to do with repetition. Did I say reputation? Repetition by the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, who has an amazing reputation, I think. He's one of my, crazy heroes. Anyways, in which Ai Weiwei commissioned the members of an entire village, most everyone in it, to create or reproduce single symbolic motifs like this out of clay, and they fired them and everything. But they didn't make just a couple. They made a bazillion to fill this entire gallery. And the point was for interaction, human interaction, and contemplation on a zillion topics. Look them up, Ai Weiwei, but mostly how we potentially use people as objects. We use people for our own ends, etc. That's only one of many angles to his work. He's a multifaceted guy with multifaceted work. Anyways, there are many applications of repetition. For example, here again, Reinhurst, we talked about last time, and he's repeating motifs here. Well, the motifs change, but the size and format of them stays constant. So there's a sense of repetition, although each one is different and evokes completely different thoughts about what they mean and what they're about. But there is a very definite sense of repetition, as with here, where you have a sense of sequencing, right? Or here, where these repeating patterns create a sense of rhythm. Or here, an all-enveloping skin that encompasses the entire vase. All right, so balance, movement, emphasis, repetition, transition being the last. And I don't know, I just think this one is just like crazy important. It's a passage from one form to the next. That's really oversimplification. Segue, passion, movement, conversion, metamorphosis, subtle nuance. So, you can say a bunch of things about it, but literally, it's from here to there, but in symbolic terms, some are here to there. We're going down the road, but look at the beautiful transition of that road, right? It can be a transition of time, like from life to death, but it can also be of specific forms. In architecture, you have a floor, you have supporting elements, and you have a roof or ceiling. But there's transitions, which isn't all one thing. There's careful transitions. Look at all these transitions between that in architecture, right? As in all art forms. And some transitions, and specifically in architecture, can be very symbolic. Of course, the World Trade Center. But also, transitions create different sort of vibes. Here you have the sleek and the cool, right? We all like certain cars and stuff, for example. They're all designed by somebody specifically thinking that I want this to be appealing for the way all these transitions work, right? And also the opposite, not the opposite, but a very different example might be the discontentedly dark, of emo girl, but she has a mouth and nose and eyes, and you can look at a zillion mouth, nose, and eyes, and you're not going to see, this expression. It has to do with how these transitions between these things work. from the forehead down from the eyes down the nose, the kind of gaze of the eyes, and the pout of the mouth. All of these things, how these different, elements of her face transition from one to the other is all about how it works and what kind of specific content it has. With that said, you can try to create an ideal of physical perfection, as the Greeks, they were all about that. Or stylizations, also known as abstractions, which are stereotypical of modernism, right? Or the light-hearted in transition, or amusing, place in Portland, or the joyful. But you can see there's a transition or sequence from this to this to this. Basically, segues from this to that is what transition is about, but there's all kinds of nuances in between. So for our purposes, we have a lip, a neck, perhaps handles, a body, and a foot, right? So how is this transitioning to this? How is this transitioning to that? There's intermediate areas, and how is the interface handled? How are you going to handle that? It's important concluding points. What's the fit between form and surface design? Here we have a basic form with all kinds of interesting compositional elements that I think really work, how these handles fit the form and this foot, etc. But what's the fit between form and surface design, and do these echo one another in meaningful transitions? And in this case, because of these shapes of the octopus here and the recurring shapes of the overall form, the tentacles recurring and having a sense of pattern because of the handles, etc. The surface and the form have a sense of continuity and a sense of working, basically working like this. And for the same reasons, this basic, very simple form is a really deceptively simple object, but this spout that comes down and naturally continues in the same form and line to come down to the shoulder, and this shape of the shoulders, which is echoed again and recurs in these shapes on the surface. All of these negative spaces that you see again and again within the form, I think, is what creates a very positive overall composition, but also having a lot to do with transition, right? Okay, so here's all the elements again. We've gone from here to here to here, and coming attractions next time we'll be discussing content and scale in order to create composition. And also just that the most important thing of what we're all shooting for in art is a sense of meaning, and whether or not that really causes us to stop us in our tracks, which is what arrest means in the term aesthetic arrest. It stops us in our tracks and we think, oh wow, what an amazing job. That's really cool. Okay. For now, goodbye, Bob. We'll try not to bore you, and we'll try to keep it interesting. So for now, you guys, go find some examples. That's part of your R&D this week. Find some examples of balance, movement, emphasis, repetition, and transition, and you will present those as your R&D, and then assemble your vase. And that's your job for this week. All done.